Welcome to Sports Scouts. I'm Joey Goodser.
I'm Mike Rupp.
And we are recording this, our 9th brand new episode on Wednesday, April 24th. We're going to talk NHL, NBA, NFL, and even more. But first, Michael will give you some scout scores.
Yeah, so the boys lacrosse team beat St. Viator 10-8 yesterday, with Charlie Silver earning the lockdown chain, coming back from injury, and Bobby Weinbrenner earning the hard hat with his 4 goals in the contest. They have New Trier to look forward to on Saturday. Boys baseball defeated Waukegan 10-0 in 5 innings yesterday, with Breck Nowick earning the commitment bat with his 2nd home run of the season. They'll be taking on Notre Dame Prep this afternoon. Girls lacrosse defeated Lake Forest Academy 18-10 on Monday. They are up against Lake Zurich today. Boys track and field had a meet on yesterday against Lake Zurich and Libertyville at Lake Zurich. They have a Spartan Relays on Friday. I was there yesterday for the track. It was a long meet, but it was a fun meet, definitely. And girls badminton had their senior night against Deerfield, has it tonight against Deerfield. They most recently played against Glenbard North at home on Monday. Boys tennis had their senior night as well, but it was yesterday, and against Zion Benton. They are squaring off against Libertyville tomorrow. Girls soccer played Warren yesterday. They are in Waukegan tomorrow. Girls softball was at Mundelein yesterday, and they are up against Zion Benton at home. Girls track and field was at Libertyville yesterday. They have Lake Counties tomorrow. Boys volleyball was at Evanston on Monday, and they will continue the road trip with Waukegan today. Boys water polo took on Glenbard North on Tuesday. McHenry is coming up as an away meet tomorrow. And girls water polo was at Glenbard North Tuesday, and we'll have New Trier at home tomorrow. And last but not least, esports has their state championship coming up this Saturday.
All right. Thanks, Michael. That was your scout scores. And if you want more on the latest in LFHS sports, check out the latest articles, such as Claire Lawler's big feature of freshman gymnast Max Solinger, Carter Horan's boys volleyball coverage, which is always constant and awesome, and Peter Lynch's big article on club versus high school sports. And then, of course, as always, the Dugout this week, Peter Torelli was Shaw's guest. All of that on the4scout.com. If you didn't hear the sport you wanted to hear, we screwed up somehow, or if you think we could have more information, which we could always use, just send in the scores and informative news to sportscoutspodcast@gmail.com so Michael can give it a shout out. And let's move into national sports with Show Me What You've Got. Okay, so for my Show Me What You've Got, it's, if you know what teams I am a fan of and what the big news in sports is lately, it's a pretty big story, so it's pretty obvious that this is probably going to be what I'm going to bring in to start the show. But yeah, on Friday, early Friday morning, the news broke that after a long period of time in which Red Wings fans were waiting for this kind of headline, Steve Yzerman was officially announced as the new general manager of the Detroit Red Wings. Of course, Steve Yzerman, a former player and longtime captain, retired number, Hall of Famer, the whole 9 yards. One of the most beloved athletes in Detroit, coming back as a GM with current GM with former GM Ken Holland moving to the position of senior vice president. So this is an absolutely huge story for the people who live in Detroit, and for the people who are familiar with the legacy of Steve Yzerman, and not only his great career as a player, but also doubling with an extremely great career as a GM. I mean, we've talked about the Lightning recently, how good they are, obviously, despite a disappointing end of their season, which Steve Yzerman left a year ago, but he built a lot of that, and built a lot of success that led the Bolts to being the 3rd winningest NHL team in the last few years here. So a legendary player that's coupled with being a world-class GM is coming back home to the Red Wings. So as a Red Wings fan, it's a super exciting story. I mean, the best comparison I can draw as far as this goes is for former players and legendary figures like Steve Yzerman, who are also good at their current job and are coming back to the organization. I mean, the only example I can really think of, and it's probably the best fitting, is Jim Harbaugh. Yeah. So it's that type of thing, and it's getting that type of reaction.
I guess he usually hasn't the same kind of track record, but another guy like John Elway, I guess, being that's so
another
big.
Good one. Yeah.
Of course he has that Super Bowl win as an executive. Of course, it's been kind of a shuffle, I guess, ever since he got a quarterback, since they got Peyton Manning. But kind of another comparison of another top athlete in his prime to then, of course, being an executive. But definitely,
yeah, for sure, that's another good example. John Elway for sure is in that type of thing, and he's obviously done significant things with the Broncos in that part of his career as well. So, yeah. Michael, what's your story that you're bringing in to start today?
Was Damian Lillard. I haven't really had that much time to digest. As I said, the track meet yesterday went really late, and we got back. Of course, it was going to be on Monday, but Coach BS accidentally messed that up, but it was all right. It was a fun meet, but it was funny in practice on Monday. A lot of us just had the actual uniform on because none of us brought other shorts, but it worked out well, and it was a really fun meet yesterday. But, definitely Dame Lillard. I haven't really digested any of it yet. I just saw the game winner this morning on Twitter before I came in.
Yeah,
and I looked up his stats, 50 points after what happened last year, after getting swept 4 games to none against the Pelicans, the 6th seed Pelicans last year. It's just Damian Lillard, he really elevated his game, and CJ McCollum too. Guys like those two guys who they really are a scary team coming out of the Western Conference, and I think they're one of the more complete teams in the Western Conference. Of course, the Rockets, it's kind of wide open this year, I think, more than in the past, even in the Western Conference.
Yeah.
Of course, the East it's been wide open for a couple of years.
Yeah, and we're going to talk more NBA playoffs, but that's a big conversation.
Damian Lillard,
lots of West teams trying to get things done. Yeah,
cold-blooded when it comes to putting the game in his hands, and that shot, I don't know how deep it was. I just saw, my gosh, it was almost like I don't, how far. I think it was at least like 40 feet or something like that.
Yeah, it was
a deep.
It was a deep shot.
It was a deep shot, but
for a game winner, that's awesome.
And I think it just, he cemented himself as last night with everyone watching him as one of the better players in the game, and he definitely deserves it because he kind of gets lost under the radar with other guys. Of course, being on the West Coast, some guys still get attention, like Steph Curry, of course, being the brand that he's built, but other guys like Dame Lillard being in Portland, they can get lost under the shuffle with other teams, and like on the East Coast, like the Celtics or even the Warriors draw a lot of attention to the Rockets. Like they're a team that's often forgotten in the NBA, and they definitely put on a show tonight or yesterday, and they're our team to look forward to watch the rest of this playoffs.
Yep, for sure. Okay, so that was Show Me What You've Got, and of course, up next is news. So before we get into the news, one thing I forgot to mention about the whole Steve Yzerman thing is that there were recent rumors, and there's not much to them as of right now, but they were recent rumors that Steve Yzerman, now that he's GM of the Red Wings, is starting to make contact with another former player from his era, Sergei Fedorov, who was a primary member of the Russian Five, a big factor in those Red Wings teams. Lots of documentaries coming out about them recently, and the transition of Soviet hockey players into the NHL. Most recently, there was one that came out that was just about the Russian Five this year. Great documentary, check that out. But yeah, so basically what we're seeing this week is there is this common theme of returning home, and we're seeing a lot of that right now. So considering that, I mentioned Stevie Y and I mentioned Sergei Fedorov earlier on the show, it's obvious that returning home is going to be that theme. So kind of a fun headline has sprung up here with San Francisco 49ers kicking legend Robbie Gould demanding a trade, according to Adam Schefter. And one of the primary motivations behind this move for the Gould family was because the rest of his family still resides in Chicago right now. Obviously, this begs the question. So, Michael, what could happen here with our once underappreciated but now very much appreciated Golden kicker? Could he be coming back to the Bears?
I don't know yet, but Robbie wants to be here. I don't know what the Bears want to do. Of course, Ryan Pace, once he came to Chicago, of course, it was kind of a questionable move, I think, at the time to get rid of Robbie Gould. But, of course, he did have struggles, and I understand why. That final year in his before he got cut with the Bears, he did actually struggle. And, of course, he turned it back around once he went back to San Francisco. But he did have his share of troubles, and I understand why Pace made the move. So I wonder if they want to bring him back once again. But I think there already is a lot of competition in Chicago. Of course, they signed Elliot Fry from the AAF, and he went to South Carolina, I believe, in his college days. And they have other kickers, Chris Blewett. I remember.
Yeah, we were talking about Chris Blewett. Yeah, he has a famous name.
And then
sure.
There's a lot of other competition. There's another guy from Memphis. I forget his name. But they already have a lot of guys, and I'm sure more will be coming in the list once we get into training camp. But I think Robbie that's a kind of a glaring indication that he wants to be here in Chicago. Like it couldn't
get more obvious.
obviously say it's pretty obvious. He didn't specifically say I want to be in Chicago, but he said I want to be near Chicago towards my family. But you know that he wants to be here. If he says near Chicago, like come on.
Yeah.
But I think if we can get him back, I think that would, for the fan base at least, everyone would, I think, buy him in the rest of his life if he came here.
Right, for sure.
But it depends on what Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy want to do, and I think that the kicker, of course, is the big priority this offseason, being what happened, of course, in the wild card game with Cody Parkey. But I think the Bears have done a good job so far getting talent in the room, the kicking room.
They're at least starting a kicking camp.
They're starting a camp, and if we get Robbie Gould, that just I think
that ends the camp.
I think it just ends the camp. But either way, I think the Bears will be okay. And of course, Robbie Gould was actually at that playoff game, and he saw the Parkey miss. So I think he's motivated, I think, to get back here. And if we can get him back,
for sure,
I'm all in.
I 100% agree. It's definitely on the Bears side of things right now. But I mean, as far as the Bears fan side of things, everybody's excited about this one. He's becoming more and more appreciated as a kicker that has legendary status in Chicago. So if he can come back home as well, this would be absolutely amazingly exciting for the Bears fan base, considering what's happened recently. So yeah, that's definitely a big story and a recent one. So we'll see how that plays out. But let's move on to our next topic for news.
Yeah, so OKC's Russell Westbrook has been hot topic of the 2019 NBA playoffs, and of course they got eliminated last night against the Trailblazers, but not entirely for his performance within the games. While it's been an ongoing occurrence, Russell Westbrook has continued iciness towards Oklahoma. Columnist Barry Trammell has spiked up once again recently with the utterance of the phrase "next question" being the common response to the columnist's question in the press conferences after the games. Mm-hmm. Many have taken the issue to this ongoing feud, including Warriors head coach Steve Kerr, who thinks this behavior may be detrimental to the league. So, Jody, do you think Steve Kerr is right or making an overstatement here?
So, I mean, maybe it's just my I don't come toward the NBA, even despite its success, that I'm willing to acknowledge and I understand. I think, and my point is maybe my less positive viewpoint of the NBA as a business model and in the way it's set up as far as player franchise relations, player press relations, that type of thing. So I want to say that he's right, but I don't know if that's just if that bias that I have is just informing me too much. But I think that while there's a clear argument in that this could I think that there's a clear argument in that this could lead to more and more players doing this, and then there's less and less of connection with the press, and also less and less of connection with the fans. And the connection is one of the main driving points that's keeping the NBA not only in business but very, very profitable and very, very successful right now. So, I mean, I can see why Steve Kerr is saying this, and I pretty much agree with him. I do think, however, that he's kind of setting up that it's a slippery slope. And it can be considered that it might not be a slippery slope, and that not everybody's Russell Westbrook, and not everybody's going to kind of do this type of thing.
Yeah.
And this is just more of a specific thing for Russell Westbrook. But I mean, I don't think every player is Russell Westbrook, and is able to do this and get away with it in the same way as Russell Westbrook. But I think that there's lots of players who may think that they're Russell Westbrook.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure,
I think that it might actually be a slippery slope, considering that. And, more and more players may start to do some variation of this. And I mean, it might not be as specific as this situation with, one specific journalist being completely iced out of the press conferences, at least from a Russell Westbrook perspective. But I mean, I think that the NBA has to take this pretty seriously and make sure that, their connection with the fans does not fall through, because they have a business model right now that's very, very successful, but it's extremely dependent on a couple factors, and that's a big one.
Yeah, if I'm him, I just wouldn't really want to draw unwanted attention. I mean, of course, if you're Russell Westbrook, you want to be known for what you do on the court and to leave all the other stuff off the court.
Even that's a conversation right now, so this is just adding to everything.
Yeah, and of course, being eliminated now, that's just going to
exactly
magnify the problem. And I think guys like Russell or Kevin Durant or anyone in the league that has a really high stature in the league and very well respected in the league, I think just answer the question and just move on. And you're only there for like 10, 15 minutes to answer questions. Just give them what they want, and then you can just go home and It's not that. I believe that Steve Kerr is right. That I think, like you said, the connection to the fans and I guess to the media too. Players or fans and media, they want to hear the players talk after a game, get their thoughts. And I think if I'm Russell, just answer the question and then go home after that. Like
Right.
it's not that hard.
I mean, it goes along with the whole theme of about how much freedom should players have in a professional sports league, which is a conversation we've had so many times on this show. So, it's a big story, and obviously, considering that we're journalists ourselves at this point, it's an interesting development because we're going to see how it affects culture in the NBA. So next story, Phillies outfielder Bryce Harper was ejected from Monday's game against the New York Mets as a result of arguing balls and strikes. Phillies pitcher and familiar Chicago figure Jake Arrieta had a quite bleak reaction to the actions of his teammate after the game, saying basically, quote, "I don't care how bad the umpire is, we need him on the field," end quote. Harper seemed to backpedal on his actions in agreement with Arrieta, but Michael, is this a good thing to be this public right now?
First, I just want to say I wish we still had Jake Arrieta. I just love the character of him. He's a fiery guy. He wants to win, and if I'm a player on the team, I would love to be around him. And he's done great with the Phillies this year so far. And of course, Darvish hasn't really panned out that much for us. But if we could have had him, I would be really happy if you still had him on the team. But I understand where he's coming from. Like I said, whether he was in his Cy Young years, the 3 years that he was on the top of his game, or the years that he was not playing too well in Baltimore before the Cubs took a gamble on him and brought him to Chicago, he always has been a fiery guy, a very passionate player, and I think that with Harper being, like I said, kind of like Russell Westbrook, being the stature that they are, I think just play the game the way it should be, and I think just arguing I think Jake said that game that the umpire was calling the game both sides, so I think it wasn't like he was just saying the Phillies, it's going to be a rough night for you guys, and the other team, the Mets, I believe they're going to get it easy tonight.
Right.
It was a hard there was a lot of hard calls for both sides, and I think if I'm Jake, you probably should leave that in the clubhouse, possibly just pull Harper aside and say, hey, listen, we need you out there, and we can't have you doing this kind of stuff, kind of drawing, kind of like Russell Westbrook again, unwanted attention towards the team, and I think Harper understands this now, and I think having a guy like Jake as a leader in the clubhouse, I think Harper will, of course he's had some other incidents in the past in Washington, but I think having a guy like Jake who can kind of cool him down, I think this is actually really good for Bryce Harper, just to understand that it's more important than just one call, and the Phillies need him out there in right field every game. So if he's healthy and he can fully play, just don't have any of this other stuff going on to have him cost them a game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Jake Arrieta was, described in this situation by Michael Wilbon on PTI, who obviously has a similar bias that we do. But, he was basically described as an adult, and I think that makes total sense, is that this is a move where, an adult who has a lot of experience is telling a great player who has less experience, basically trying to keep them in line and acting like a leader in this situation. So while I would be cautious about exactly what is said in interviews and in press conferences and these types of things after games, and considering the heat of the moment, maybe the situation is he wouldn't have said this had it not been right after. But at the same time, I think what was actually said was totally fine to be public, because it's just positively showing that the Phillies are building right now, as far as
building
the
Cubs kind of culture.
Right, building a new environment. The Cubs had David Ross that year when they won the World Series. They need that experience, and they need those teaching moments, and this is just publicly showing that those teaching moments are happening. It's not really showing the darkest sides of it. So I think that Jake Arrieta was smart with his wording. So I think that this is actually fine, and this might turn out to be kind of a positive development for the Phillies as far as just Jake Arrieta's leadership goes. But yeah, definitely agree with you. I would love seeing Jake Arrieta back because he's just such a great player.
I think the headline was kind of blown out of proportion too. Is like Jake Arrieta takes shot at Bryce Harper. That's not what happened. He just told him, like, listen, we're in this together.
Right.
We want to win together, and
this is what we need to do.
If we have to get rid of we have to get rid of this one part of your game and your attitude. And I fully understand what Jake Arrieta wanted to do. Maybe they should have kept the private instead of public, but I think it actually is a good thing to show that the Phillies they want to win, and they're here to stay, and they have a lot of talented players on their team from now I guess starting from last year and then getting Bryce this offseason, and I think they're in a really good spot as a franchise, I think, and having a guy like Jake kind of rally the troops every now and then is great to have.
Okay. So let's move on to our last news.
So the very last one, the Stanley Cup playoffs, of course, are the roaring start has continued into last week with the Colorado Avalanche upsetting the Calgary Flames and the Dallas Stars beating the Nashville Predators in overtime, and three game sevens with the Bruins and Sharks moving on at the expense of Toronto and Vegas, respectively. The third game 7 takes place tonight with the Canes and Caps. So Joey, is the excitement and playoff hype sustainable?
So we talked about this going into the playoffs and previewing it when we had Mark on what was it, last week at this point?
Yeah, last week. You were on with, I wasn't on with him.
Well, you weren't on with him, but we were on, and I
Yep.
think we talked about this even, so regardless. We talked about the playoff format. We talked about the new division format, and we basically came to the sentiments that it is going to be beneficial in that it will create a crazy exciting first round, but it might be detrimental in that those first round matchups that are going to be awesome maybe should have happened later. And so what we're going to see is kind of an unbalance, and it's going to start to get a little bit less exciting. So this is a reasonable question right here. So, I mean, I guess at this point, this is we're just going to have to see if this playoff system is proven to be more efficient, and we're going to have to see if all this exciting hockey that we've been blessed with is not just a first-round thing as a result of these divisional matchups. But, I mean, this stuff is crazy exciting. Two game sevens. I mean, if the Preds had beat the Dallas Stars with 1 goal in overtime in that game that ended that series, we would have had 4 game sevens. We would have had 2 last night and 2 tonight.
That's great hockey,
which is crazy. And the Bruins once again beat the Maple Leafs in a game 7, which is just crazy for Leafs fans. I feel bad for them because it just keeps happening.
Yeah.
And then Vegas, San Jose, on the other hand, one of the greatest games of this year for sure in that game 7 last night that went to overtime. They went to a double overtime the previous game, and now they go to overtime, and the Sharks score the winning goal in beautiful fashion at home to win the series. So there's a lot of really, really cool stuff going on right now, and I definitely think the Stanley Cup playoffs are something to keep a big eye on because it's giving us a lot of really, really exciting moments just so far. Just the question is this system gonna absolutely destroy the later rounds and make it way less exciting? So
kind of like a fatigue factor, having the place against teams that you would probably play later in the playoffs.
Right.
It kind of can be draining, and probably for the players, having to give it all out. I mean, I guess having to go 7 instead of having to go like 5, I guess, make a big difference.
It's going to make a huge difference for sure. I would like to mention this just before we move on here. Because of all the crazy upsets and all of that crazy stuff that's been going on in the Stanley Cup playoffs, for the first time, the NHL is announcing that they're going to do a second chance bracket challenge. And this is a common thing for March Madness, but this is now being enacted for the Stanley Cup playoffs, considering that 49% of people, including me, picked the Tampa Bay Lightning to win the Cup, and they're out in the first round. Along with so many of my other teams. My current bracket is absolutely screwed right now. I have nobody in the final 4. It's bad. In the conference finals. But yeah, so we don't know specifically because they haven't done a second chance bracket challenge yet, but this is their first time. So we're going to have to see what the system is, but if possible, and we'll just post it with we'll make sure to post it.
Podcast link.
We'll post it with the podcast link. We'll post it. Hopefully, we'll get it out to all the podcast sources here. But if it's possible, we will have a bracket group for second chance for the Stanley Cup playoffs because it's just so much fun. So, hopefully we can get some people into that. And it basically goes, the amount of time in which you can fill it out basically goes from when the first round ends. So that'll basically be the end of the Washington-Carolina game tonight, all the way to right before the first game of the second round starts. So there's that gap of time here where you could fill out your second chance bracket and try to get some redemption from all the losses that were faced in the first round, but in exciting fashion, so it's kind of worth it, to be honest. But yeah, we'll just see what happens. If there's no link posted anywhere, then that just means it didn't work out. But if there is, make sure to join that Stanley Cup playoff second chance bracket group. We're going to have a Sports Scouts bracket group, and it'll be fun. So, yeah, that's news. And we're going to move into Let's Sit Down. This week on Let's Sit Down, we have Jay DeCoster, who is the co-host of the Bear Down Weekly podcast. And obviously a big thing going on NFL-wise is the draft. So we previewed that. And, yeah, so enjoy that. Welcome to Let's Sit Down. This week we have a very, very special guest who has been long awaited. And we are going to, of course, talk about something we've been hyping up for a couple weeks now and is now finally here this week. Of course, I'm talking about the NFL Draft. And with us we have the other co-host of the Bear Down Weekly. Of course, Shaw's been on a bunch of times. But Jay DeCoster, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. It's good to be on here and let's get it going.
Jay, good to have you today.
Thank you.
We'd like to hear what you want, or we would love to hear what you think about this upcoming draft. Of course, we know you and AJ talked about it on the Bear Down Weekly for the Bears, but just, I guess, more of a general kind of take on the draft for Thursday. We'd like to hear what you think.
It's going to be exciting. I'm really, obviously we're expecting Kyler Murray to go number 1 overall, and it's a good QB class as usual, but the defense, as far as the defensive side of the ball, I'm really in love with, the guys there. You got Quinn Williams, Nick Bosa, Josh Allen. It's a crazy defensive class for teams like, the Oakland Raiders, who desperately need defense, especially, up front. So I'm looking at these guys and, very defensive heavy. So it's going to be really exciting to watch come Thursday. So,
yeah, with those 3 first-round picks the Raiders have, it'll be interesting to see what they do. If they take a quarterback, possibly with the first pick, or they go defense. It'll be interesting. I don't really know what John Gruden's. He's apparently, the rumor was he sent everyone else besides Mike Mayock home, the general manager. All the scouts went home besides Mayock, of course, the GM, and Gruden, the head coach. But everyone else was at home. It seems like kind of already some dysfunction there in Oakland, which I'm not surprised. But just for that to come public,
and
it's kind of concerning. I think
they're a big conversation, just considering front office moves, and at this point, they're in a place where they have to really get stuff done if they're gonna win back over their fans at this point. But yeah, I definitely agree with you in that. Like, it's the quarterbacks are gonna kind of be the face of this draft, and if I were to write an NFL draft preview right now, Kyler Murray would probably be on the cover. Mm-hmm. But I think that long term, we're definitely going to see all these strong defensive players have the biggest impact on the league in the future, and that's what we'll probably remember from 2019.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And, Kyler Murray, people talk about his size, but you look at guys like Russell Wilson, like, in my opinion, you don't even need size.
Right.
He's also really fast, and he could run around the field. And I think Cliff Kingsbury, even though I didn't really like the hire, I think it'll really help him. I think it'll really help, the Cardinals, get back to where they were, a few years ago. So Kyler Murray, he's a great talent. Same with Dwayne Haskins, a great arm.
Absolutely.
He's obviously more of a thrower than a runner. Stephen A. wouldn't say that, but coming from Ohio State, he's lit up Michigan. Sorry, Joey, but he's a freak. Obviously lit up Northwestern. I believe, what was the score of that game?
It's like, Joey probably knows. It was in the 50s that game.
Yeah, I mean,
50 something to
freak.
They're up big, basically.
They're both freak talents, but and as far as the defensive side, you got Josh Allen, who had 17 sacks this year. I mean,
right.
It's crazy. And then people are saying Quinn Williams they're drawing comparisons to, Aaron Donald. So
right, and I think he's probably one of the best players in the draft, and he looks like a mid-first rounder right now. So that just shows there's kind of an underground depth that we're seeing this year. So that's exciting.
And of course, if the Cardinals do go, of course, with Kyler Murray being the number 1 pick right now, a lot of mock drafts, Josh Rosen will probably. I wonder which team will move up, I guess, or kind of step up to the plate and take a gamble on him through a trade. I mean, I think it's worth it for a team like a Giants, like even a Bengals or Dolphins, like one of those teams. I think that would be a really good move because you get a guy that was a early first round. I don't know how he's going to turn out, but he was an early first round pick last year, and to get maybe a second round pick or a third round for Josh Rosen, I think that's definitely a big win, and you can still save your first round pick if you're a team like the Bengals or Dolphins or even the Giants.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because last year they traded up from 7. I believe they gave up like a third and a fifth to get Josh Rosen.
Right.
Josh Rosen at 10, and now you're just gonna punt on him for like a second round pick. Like,
Yeah, I guess. I guess with
Steve Keim, their GM, I'm not really agreeing with what their plan is, but if Kyler Murray is the best quarterback, then so be it. So
And if they knew that Steve Wilkins wasn't their guy last year, then Steve Wilkes. I meant, yeah. If they knew that he wasn't their guy last year, why would you make that move if you knew that he was possibly not going to be your long-term coach and give up all that draft capital? I guess just to get a guy you don't even want.
Yeah, I mean, in regards to the Cardinals and the first-round pick, Jay and I were talking about this before the show started, but I mean, this is one of those years, and it comes pretty frequently where there's one player who everybody has their eye on as the number one pick. And I think betting odds right now are extremely high for Kyler Murray being picked number one, and reasonably so. But I think what makes the draft so exciting is that could just very well not happen. Yeah. I got to be honest. Like, I don't know. I would be willing to put a lot of my money on Kyler Murray making that first round pick, and going up to the podium first. But I honestly would not be that surprised if it didn't happen, just simply because that's the nature of the draft. So we'll have to see what happens. I definitely think it's probably the best move for Arizona, but I mean, the biggest thing about the draft is trying to find that flaw, and maybe they figure out that Kyler Murray's flaws are too big. But I mean, we'll have to see what happens. So
yeah, I mean, you also get trades. You get everything going. Like 2 years ago, the Bears trade up and get Trubisky. So anything can happen. Honestly.
Right, anything.
Like we could see like the Dolphins trade from 13 to like 13 to 3 to select a quarterback. So because the Jets are trying to trade down, so anything can happen, and that's the best part about the draft. So
yeah, if I'm the Jets, like you said, I would definitely look. If I'm getting calls on draft day, I would definitely if they can move down and they can get maybe a second round pick with the later first round pick. I mean, I'm all in for that because the Jets, they got their guy they believe in Sam Darnold, and they got Le'Veon Bell now to go with them, and maybe just they can get a receiver to second round to supplement Le'Veon in the backfield and on the outside. Get a receiver. I mean, I think that'll be a win for the Jets, definitely. And
yeah,
maybe, like,
for sure.
Another team you gotta look out for in New York is the Giants. I don't really know what Dave Gettleman's gonna do. I'm just confused because last year
that's so true.
You take Saquon Barkley and you pass up on a lot of quarterbacks that were taken like Sam Darnold last year. And I'm just kind of the direction of the team. I don't know.
That face.
They let go
it's gonna have to be somebody.
And they let go of Landon Collins on the defense, and I just don't get what direction. And Odell, of course, is gone now, so I'm just kind of confused where they're headed. And if they don't take a quarterback, they're probably going to hear a lot from the media and fans.
We'll have to see because that's gonna be one of the more dramatic ones. But that's basically what the 2019 NFL Draft is looking like right now, and I think we should probably move forward. Our next segment here. Each of us picked out 2 players to be for teams to be excited for, and basically it's a decent mix of players, just that we're willing to give some shout outs to. So I think we'll just go around the table one player at a time, and we'll just go 2 times around because we have 2 players. Yeah. But Jay, would you like to start with your first player?
Yeah, sure. Quinn. I mean, this is an obvious one, but Quinn Williams. I mean, this guy. I mean, I looked on some mock drafts and they're saying he's been drawing comparisons like Aaron Donald. I mean, he can rush the passer, stop the run. He can do everything you want in a guy. He had 8.5 sacks, but that's not. He had 19.5 tackles for loss, which is insane for a guy up front. So, it's gonna be exciting to see this guy next year, and the Niners gonna have a decision to make. If they're gonna take Bosa or go inside to pair Williams with DeForest Buckner. So yeah, a lot to like about this guy. So
yeah, for sure. Michael, do you want to go first player?
So the first guy, we were just talking about him, but Dwayne Haskins, I think, and also I could throw in other names like Drew Lock, of course, from Missouri, and Daniel Jones from Duke, the 2 quarterbacks. I mean, we've seen John Gruden. He's talked up because I think he was on his Senior Bowl team, Drew Lock, that is. And he really had a lot of positive things to say about him and his game and his attitude and whatever, all that stuff. But I think it'll be interesting to see. I think Murray will be the first quarterback out the board at number 1. I think that Cliff and his guys will take him because that fits their system too perfectly. I think they'll pass up on him, even though they could get a guy like Nick Bosa. But I think you got to do that for the future of the franchise. But I think I'm interested just to see then how the quarterbacks play out after that. I still
That's
think
true.
that Dwayne Haskins will be the next guy off the board, but I think, like I said earlier, like a team like the Dolphins could move up. I think they're at pick 13 right now, or around there. And they can move up possibly to 6 and move back with the Giants if they all of a sudden think they can still use him for another year, which I don't think that is a smart move, but they could do that. So I'm just interested to see, where Dwayne Haskins. There's a lot of movement right now, like more than other years, with so many teams needing a quarterback right now, and the emphasis on quarterback and such, like teams like even like the Broncos too is another team to throw in there. Like they could get aggressive. Joe Flacco's best years are behind him, I think, and definitely there's a lot of teams that have kind of a bridge quarterback right now, and they could take a young quarterback like we saw with Patrick Mahomes, of course. When Alex Smith was still there, you kind of groomed him for 1 year under Smith, and then they unleashed him the next year. So I think there's a lot of teams that could move up to possibly the Giants pick or even earlier than that to get their guy.
Yeah, I mean, just real quick fun fact about Dwayne Haskins. I mean, we were waiting on a bunch of things. We were just talking about the Giants, but the last time a Big Ten quarterback, I think, was drafted in the top 10 was like 1995. So there's been a long drought here, and so the big question is where Dwayne Haskins is going to end up, and we're going to have to see what happens. Then, this was the moment when, sounds like somebody's walked in, 2 longtime characters on the show.
You guys, long-time listener, first-time caller.
Stormed into the room.
We're on it right now, all right?
Blondie, you know what? Going over our draft coverage, and you're just interrupting.
You guys are just storming in here to confront Jay about the Dwayne Haskins take.
Just how do you feel about yourself knowing you steal tape?
You're not even on here, so.
Dexter Williams is better than Saquon Barkley.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a hot take. We apologize for the interruption, as this did in fact occur during this segment in the studio. Peters and Carson will return soon. Now back to the show. Anyway, moving in to my first player. Obviously, I was gonna have to bring up one Michigan Wolverine because I feel like I just have to do that at this point because people are gonna wonder which player I'm gonna point out here. And, we got a good amount to choose from with Chase Winovich, Karan Higdon, Zach Gentry, some quality players. But as far as draft hype, while I would, probably it would be logical to bring up Rashawn Gary, and he's going to be a big conversation considering his injury and how that affects his pick, because he's been long awaited as far as NFL draft prospects. So there's that. I'm going to bring up Devin Bush, though, considering that he just has some crazy ability. So he's an inside linebacker, and basically his big strength is that he's super explosive, and he can cover a lot of field and find players really quickly. So if you're looking for those powerful tackles, there's some videos on Twitter and stuff even of him in practice just absolutely destroying practice dummies from running starts, and that's kind of what he's super good at. I like to call him a ball-seeking missile because that's basically what he is. So, I expect him to go mid-first round, something like that. The question will be whether or not he can sneak into the top 10. If he does, he'll probably go with the Broncos at number 10, or whether he falls out of that. It'll be interesting. But that's generally kind of the area where he probably will be drafted. But I think it's kind of crazy, and I wouldn't expect this, but I think that he's probably getting the most hype out of any Michigan player this close to the draft, which is weird because Rashawn Gary is part of this conversation. So, yeah.
I have a question. Do you think Devin Bush would draw comparisons to Roquan Smith or Darius Leonard? Do you think he could be that type of player?
I think that type of player for sure. I don't know how he's going to compare to them in the end, but I mean he's in that type of sphere as far as the type of player that you're looking at for sure. Yeah.
And Louis Riddick called Devin Bush the best player he thinks in the draft. So
wow,
definitely.
I don't know about that.
I
think that he's up there though.
But I do respect Riddick a lot. He's definitely been a big believer in the Bears, of course, and since day one. And I think he's definitely one of the better guys at ESPN. Of course, some of the guys, I don't know. I'm not too to take their information. Sometimes I just kind of
I'm not
just let them talk and don't really take it all in.
Mel Kiper and Tom McShay, they're pretty good.
They're pretty good,
they
but
can get annoying
sometimes yeah.
Lewis Riddick's spot on.
He's one of the more better guys at ESPN to take information from. But I think if he's saying that Bush is one of his top guys, I think a lot of teams will, like a Broncos, that would be a perfect ideal fit for them.
I think that would be the best fit, and that's going to be the interesting part, is whether he gets up there, and especially where he's drafted relative to Rashawn Gary, because Rashawn Gary is a big question because he's such a powerful player, but then there's that injury that has been kind of plaguing him for a while, and unlike Nick Bosa, he played through it and it kind of continued, so we're gonna have to see what happens with that. But yeah, so Michael, who's your first player? Oh wait, we actually went through. So Jay, we'll go back to Jay.
Yeah, I mean,
your second player.
Yeah, another beast in this draft. I'm probably going to be a top 5 pick. Josh Allen. I mean, he had 17 sacks. 2018 for Kentucky, and helped them with a 10-3 record, which is that like the best in their history? Because they're a basketball school, so
It's got to be up there. One of their better years.
He really helped he really helped bolster their defense. And I'm looking at the Oakland Raiders, drafting him just because they need they lost a guy by the name of Khalil Mack, so maybe he'll take over that spot. I don't think he'll be as good as Khalil Mack, but I think he'll be relatively close.
Right.
His athleticism is crazy. He can get out. His speed is. I love his speed. Get off the edge really. Quick. So he's a freak talent. His his athleticism helps him. With getting off the edge. So I think the Raiders will be taking him, but anything can happen. So.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens. I definitely agree. He's the Khalil Mack type of player. Whether he gets up to that caliber, I'm not sure. But I mean,
the Raiders, I think, need to go defense. So that would be a really good.
That's
pick
a high bar to set. Yeah. But I think that this is definitely, I think that the Raiders definitely need to fill that hole. That's kind of the biggest thing, because I don't think that decision has aged well. That's for sure, considering how much Khalil Mack has been loved around here, and how
they need to hit a home run, basically.
How relatively easily, how relatively easily, basically, he was given to the Bears. So, we're going to have to see what they do, but I definitely think they're going defense, and Josh Allen's probably up there for sure. Yeah. Michael, you're number 2.
Yeah, so Noah Fant, the tight end from Iowa. I really love this guy. He's definitely probably the best tight end this year, I think. And I think that teams like the Raiders, they could be in the conversation, maybe in late round pick. That's where he's projected, late first round, early second round. But I think that the Packers are a team to look out for. Yeah. Of course, with their new head coach, Matt LaFleur. He leaned heavily last year in a 3 tight end set in Tennessee when he was there as the offensive coordinator. But now he's in Green Bay, of course, and Aaron Rodgers loved his tight ends. Jimmy Graham, of course, and Mercedes Lewis, who's definitely not the kind of caliber as Jimmy Graham is, I guess, and kind of was. But I think if you bring a guy in like Noah Fant, I guess he can learn from Jimmy Graham for a couple years, however long Jimmy stays in Green Bay, or if he retires coming up in a couple years. But he can learn under Jimmy Graham. Then he can kind of just expand his role each game, each season after the first year, even because you don't really see tight ends that often in their first year, like put up big numbers. But maybe even if like Jimmy Graham gets hurt or something, or Mercedes Lewis isn't playing up to par or whatever, then they could plug in a guy like Noah, and I think he's definitely one of the more valuable players on the offensive side in this draft.
Pretty underappreciated too. Even though not too much conversation out of Iowa City as far as the team goes, they got a lot of draft prospects, and they're going to make a splash this year. So Noah Fant's definitely the leader of that. So
yeah.
Yep, for sure. My number 2, I guess, last but not least, he was brought up earlier by our guys who stormed in. You guys may or may not see some of that. But I have Marquise Brown, the wide receiver out of Oklahoma, is just another player to mention. Considering that the hottest topic of draft hype has been Kyler Murray, and so often on the other side of those highlights is Marquise Brown. And as far as he goes, yes, he is Antonio Brown's cousin, so that'll be interesting. And it'll be interesting to see how teams respond to that as far as ability to say stuff on social media. But other than that, I mean, his strengths here are definitely his ability to just just beat angles downfield and get separation, which is something that I think NFL teams are going to more and more look for. I think, as far as the NFL model, I feel like there's definitely the biggest thing is making those short first down throws, and the biggest thing is to do that is to get separation with your receivers, and that's one of his big strengths. His big weakness obviously is his size. He's super small, so we're gonna have to see how that works. It might take a couple of years for him to really get active, but I think that considering the style of the game, it's gonna be something big to look at, because his strengths really apply to how to make an explosive NFL offense. So
yeah, he's definitely got to look out for.
Assuming his size works out, we'll have to see. I think he's a mid to low first rounder. So, yeah.
And also before we move on, I guess also wanted to say T.J. Hawkinson, another guy from Iowa. They have two guys that could possibly go first round, two tight ends on the same team. So that's definitely something to look out for the Big Ten, I guess. Yeah. And the School of Iowa to definitely be proud of.
And one question for Joey: How would you compare Marquise Brown, like a guy like DK Metcalf? Like, what do you think the difference is there?
I think
different kinds of players, I guess.
Yeah. Just slight difference. As far as the thing really is that it's like small size, but there's some good speed there, and like I said, separation. So that's really what you're looking at with a guy like Marquise Brown is, are you going to value that speed, and are you going to use that, or is he just going to be a normal wide receiver, and if you play him that way, he might get destroyed by the NFL size. So it's really going to depend on how the NFL team that picks him will use him, because that can either be really, really beneficial, or it can totally destroy a team because of his size. So it's just depending on the way he's used, it's definitely gonna affect how his career turns out.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think you need size in the NFL, and we'll see if Marquise Brown can
live
up to that. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how everything plays out. So.
Yep, for sure. All right, so the NFL draft is Thursday through Sunday. Thursday through Saturday. It's in Nashville this year. As usual, it's on your usual sports networks. I'm pretty sure the first round's going to be on ESPN and NFL Network.
They're both on NFL Network and ESPN. So yeah,
I think
so
actually might be ABC. I think
both.
I think
ESPN
because ESPN and ABC, I guess.
I know. Either way, it's a huge media circus, and for good reason. It's a lot of fun for Michael and I. Obviously, it's cool because in the end we do originate as being football guys, and
football guys.
This is kind of where college football and the NFL comes together. So. It's always an exciting event. So yeah, definitely look forward to that. If you're watching this, the draft is probably either happening right now, or it already happened, or if you're one of our first listeners, which is awesome, it's happening in a couple hours. So definitely check that out. Yeah, Jay, do you have anything else to say about the 2019 NFL draft?
No. It's just defensive heavy. It's teams, like the Raiders or Jets, defensive need teams are going to be, salivating, and I think it's going to show with guys like Josh Allen and, guys that can rush the passer, and with guys later rounds like late first round like Greedy Williams from LSU, who's a really nice,
another good
corner.
player that took us a while
really
to
nice
mention,
corner,
but we should.
I forgot about him, and I think he'll be a nice sleeper for late first round. So yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
Jay, thanks for being on the show. This was awesome.
Thanks a lot for having me.
And we'll see you later. And we'll send it back to
thanks, Jay.
The next segment.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back from Let's Sit Down. Hopefully you enjoyed that, especially some certain people that we know storming into the studio. But that was a big fun moment. But yeah, as said, Carson and Peters are long-time listener, first-time callers will be
every time.
Yeah, as always. They'll actually be on their first normal show. We'll see how this goes next week. So
it should be fun.
It should be fun. We'll see what happens. We're probably just going to talk about general hot takes because it can go in any direction.
I don't know where it's going to go.
We'll see.
We'll start somewhere, end up somewhere else. So
but yeah, they'll get their own chance to kind of have their own chances to get, I guess, kind of full response to what they claim Jay DeCoster has done, which is steal takes. So, they'll get their time in the show. So that was kind of a fun moment. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed. Let's sit down and let's move into our next segment. Actually, before we do that, real quick, I do want to say once again, local music. If you have it, send it. We're still up for that. So make sure you do that if you're interested. We're interested in playing your stuff right now. But yeah, so let's move into They Don't Scout Like This. Okay, so for They Don't Scout Like This, we talked a lot about the Stanley Cup playoffs lately, and some just random NBA stories, I guess, but really no general NBA playoffs talk, so I thought that we should dedicate this segment to the sources of excitement that we can have for the NBA playoffs. And there's a bunch of different directions to go. And basically, we're just gonna go through it right now and look at the playoffs currently. So, Michael, do you have anything right at the top of the show to look at as far as just exciting things in these NBA playoffs right now?
I think besides, of course, we said a team that's forgotten was the Trailblazers we mentioned earlier.
Right.
It's been forgotten. I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense based on the way they played last year in the first round. Of course, getting swept in four games against the New Orleans Pelicans. Of course, I think Dame and CJ McCollum, all the guys there, they definitely rallied around this year, and they didn't want to be that team again to lose in 4 games and go home in the first round after having a really great regular season. So they definitely are a team to look forward to. But going to the East now, the Bucks, they're another team that's just always I don't know why, but
they're
just being in
They're
Milwaukee,
definitely the leading force in this conversation right now. So
and they've been the 1 seed all year long in the East, and you hear more of the 76ers than you do of the Bucks, and the Sixers were the 3 or 4 seed, I believe, and you hear more of the Raptors too. Any of those other teams that are in the hunt, you hear a lot more from them than the Bucks, even though the Bucks are the best team in the NBA this year based on the regular season. And I think just being probably in Milwaukee, not getting that big market kind of attention that other teams get, such as other teams like the Knicks, I guess, even get more attention than they probably do.
Right, it's crazy.
And they are horrible. And so I think, but the Bucks are a team that I'm really looking forward to watch in the second round. Of course, they swept the Detroit Pistons. A lot of credit to Blake Griffin, though, playing through that pretty bad injury he had, but he played through it, he persevered through it, and definitely, even though they got swept, I give a lot of credit to him for just gutting it out. And I think another team to look forward to still is the 76ers. I think that'll be kind of cool if we can get a matchup between the Bucks and them. But I think if Joel Embiid can stay healthy throughout the rest of the playoffs, of course that's always a big question with him, and he's already been injured going into these playoffs, and he's not played in every single game in the playoffs. And I think they need him if they want to move on going into the later stages of the playoffs, such as the finals. So I think it's gonna be really exciting to see what happens now. And I still think the Bucks are the favorite, but it still is wide open, honestly. And the Raptors could sneak in there, 76ers, like I said, and there's a lot of teams that could really, I still think, make some noise. Yeah,
I mean, considering who I am and what I'm wearing right now, obviously the NBA playoffs don't really define this time of year for me. But I mean, looking at these playoffs, I think the biggest thing is there's a lot of new rising talent, new rising potential in lots of different teams, specifically in the Eastern Conference, which is something that, at least for me, is engaging, because I feel like as far as the NBA goes, once you get deeper into each conference, I think I identify with the franchises in the Eastern Conference a lot more, just seeing, even the Milwaukee Bucks, just because they're so local. Yeah. It's kind of fun to see that they're doing well. 76ers, obviously, they're, despite their lack of success lately, I mean, they're building, and, they are a classic NBA franchise. Just seeing the Celtics, all these teams out of the Eastern Conference that are starting to move in an upward direction is kind of exciting. And so we'll have to see what happens, especially with Giannis and the Bucks. I think the thing is for them to make a huge splash and for Giannis to make a huge splash, I think he has to have a big playoff run this year. I think they need to, at least probably make it to the conference finals, maybe even to the finals. I don't think they have to win this thing to send their message. I feel like people can basically accept that the current superstars probably are going to beat a rising superstar in Giannis. But as far as that goes, that's exciting. Rising talent in kind of a period where the league's transitioning. So we'll have to see if it transitions to an exciting place, and that's kind of the fun part
and
of the playoffs this year.
And the Bucks look the next coming days they're going to try and see where Malcolm Brogdon's at. Of course, he's a big part of their team.
Yeah,
being
sure.
their starting point guard on their team. And I think, so I guess here I'll just break it down the remaining teams that are left. So in the East, the conference semis, we have Milwaukee playing against Boston, then Philly, Toronto. Then heading to the West, we have the only team that is locked in right now is the Portland Trailblazers, of course, defeating Oklahoma. But then the series we have left in the West, of course, Golden State's up 3-1 right now against LA.
Mm-hmm.
That'll probably end tonight. Then we have Houston versus Utah, and that's probably going to end pretty soon. I think the Rockets have looked really good this series.
I mean, yeah, lots of fun matchups building up.
But
especially like.
Yeah, the last one is Denver versus San Antonio, and that's actually been a really good series. It's kind of been under the radar with DeMar DeRozan just played
underrated. I mean,
really well.
Sometimes you forget that the Nuggets are the 2 seed in the West.
I know
it's it's a big year for them.
They're another team that gets forgotten too. Jamal Murray's a great player.
Yeah,
and they've burst on the scenes too, and I think it's going to be exciting actually. More than the last couple of years, I think. Of course, we just know who's going to come out of the West every year.
Right.
And East
this
kind of
year it's a little bit more
LeBron.
in question.
Yeah, but now it's more in question.
So yeah, we're in that transition period. So it's going to be interesting to see how things move into a new era. So yeah, for sure. I think that the second round, as far as things go, the most likely matchups are looking extremely exciting. Bucks Celtics is fun. 76ers Raptors potentially looks like a good time.
Up now. I mean, the Orlando Toronto's wrapped up, so yeah, Toronto versus them.
Warriors Rockets, super talked about, so that one's big. I mean, these are some big second round matchups. That arguably, but this time it's a little bit more reasonable considering the NBA's straight up 1 through 8 playoff system. Many of these matchups I think people would more want to see later in the playoffs, and we're getting all of them overwhelmingly at once in the second round. So things might get hockey was absolutely destroying as of right now relative to the NBA, and then the NBA was kind of starting as usual and starting as predictable. There could be a slight change in the tide as things get a little bit more exciting in the second round. So we're going to have to look out for that.
It's going to be fun for at least the East right now. What's ready it's already set in stone for the semis. And if Boston wins, I mean, if you pair them against like the Raptors or 76ers, they got a good shot still. And I think they still have a decently good shot against Milwaukee the way they played. Of course, the Pacers without Victor Oladipo aren't the same team, but they've really shored some things up. Gordon Hayward's been a phenomenal contributor, I guess, for their team the last couple of weeks, and he's really burst on the scenes ever since his injury. Of course, he hasn't been the player he wanted to be, I guess, once he came to Boston. He's going to be the guy, but he's slowly eased himself back, and he definitely is starting to turn the corner and be the kind of near the player, not of course the player he was with the Jazz, but he's starting to turn the corner, and I think the Boston, if they can get whatever they get out of him, is a bonus to go along with Kyrie and Jason Tatum, Al Horford, all those guys they have there.
It would be interesting to see them go on a deep run, but they got some teams to go through. On the West side, it's going to be about what the Warriors can and can't do. Not as much as normal though, and that's the big thing.
Right.
Is that
it's a different year, and
it's a totally different year,
team.
and it's a little bit more open. So we're gonna have to see if all of these teams who have been, decent in the last few years, that have been trying to make their way out of the West and make it to those NBA Finals, who haven't been able to get the chance because they're constantly boxed out by the Warriors. Now we're gonna have to see if they can make those big strides to take advantage of the opportunity that they have in front of them. So it's gonna be an interesting second round once that starts. What
could be good for Portland too, they don't have to face Oklahoma or Golden State until what would be
until the Western Conference
or the finals. Yeah. So that could be. If it still could be tough if they play against. It'll be tough either way against Denver if that's the team they end up facing if San Antonio doesn't come back. But I think having the Rockets, let's say the Rockets beat the Warriors or something like that, they're going to be gassed probably after that series, and that's going to take a lot out of them. I'm not saying it won't against Denver, but being the Warriors, the team that they are, I think it's a bonus for them to not having to play against them in the semis.
Yep. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it right now. But yeah, NBA playoffs continuing as
and
well.
of course the draft tomorrow night.
And the draft tomorrow night. There's just lots of fun stuff.
There's a lot of. It's always spring's always a great time of year. Starting just in March, always kicking it off with March Madness and going into the NBA playoffs. Of course, NHL, baseball started up. It's a good time of year.
Yep. And obviously, I got the phone out, so you guys know what's next. It's Your Scouting. As always with Your Scouting, make sure you send in your questions for next week at 224-544-9330. We appreciate it. Questions from everybody. It's always fun. And real quick here, let's get to our first caller.
Hey, Joey. I just was going to call in and ask. I wasn't even going to ask because I know what the answer is going to be, but Theo Epstein should be fired. There's no doubt about it. Theo Epstein should be fired. Worst GM in Chicago.
Wow.
You know,
That's a hot take.
Sounds like Peter's talking there.
We should hire Dusty Baker as our GM or hire Dale Swaim as our GM. Anyway, have a good one, Joey. We all know Theo Epstein sucks. Fire Theo.
Okay, so this was last week, and obviously a lot has changed since, but I used the call anyway to bring up the conversation. Obviously, this call hasn't really aged that well, even though, obviously Shaw didn't seriously join the Fire Theo Club with Peters, but, I mean, he was obviously upset with the Cubs start, as many of us were, but, yeah, they start 2-7, then now they're just a little above.
10, yeah.
They're 11-10. They're just a little over
Big win
500 right
last
now, and they're pulling wins together. All of a sudden, things are looking good. So I mean, this is a huge one for them. I mean, what do you think at this point, Mike?
I think based on the start we had, being 2-7, Eloy Jimenez being up for the White Sox, I think with Dylan Cease on his way, I think the Cubs fans are starting to get worried. Like, what do we do here with trading for Jose Quintana? But ever since that 2-7 start, Quintana's turned it around, and he's been
a main factor.
And
he's
of course,
the name to bring up.
Theo's kind of shouldered the blame. It was on him, of course, the way the team played. He took the blame for how they played at the end of last year and the start for this year. But I think the team's all right. I think I was worried a little bit about. I'm still worried about the bullpen a little bit. But if the offense, the offense has been phenomenal, and that was a worry a lot last year. At times they could be. They were streaky, and they didn't have that streakiness to them. And they were just bad at the end of the last year.
Right.
And I was worried for them, and a couple guys are still struggling, like Kyle Schwarber, Chris Bryant are struggling. But the bottom of the order, guys like Daniel DeCoster, which is a great signing, and other guys, Wilson Contreras has been phenomenal this year. He's more in the middle of the order, but he's been great. But I think the guy that's been the most impressive has been Jose Quintana, the way he's pitched these last 3 outings. I think he's gone 7 the last 3 outings, and he had 11 strikeouts, I believe, his last start, or 2 starts ago, because he pitched last night against the Dodgers in the 7-2 victory. But he's been great. Of course, I still don't think we came anywhere close to winning that Eloy Jimenez trade. I think he's going to be a phenomenal all-star each year for the Southsiders, and Dylan Cease is going to be another great talent. But I think if we can get what we're getting from Jose Quintana, the guy we thought we were going to get, I think Cubs fans should be happy. But of course, the bullpen's still going to be a little worrisome. Brandon Morrow shut down for the foreseeable future, and that's going to be definitely going to be hindersome for the Cubs and their bullpen. Of course, Morrow really hasn't been that healthy ever since he's been here, but they need him, another weapon in the bullpen. And I mean, the bullpen has kind of turned it around a little bit. They've guys like Steve Shishak has pitched very well. Pedro Strope's been fine, and I think the Cubs are definitely. They're definitely in a way better spot where they were after 2-7. But to fire Theo, I mean, he's done so much for the Cubs organization. I think.
Right.
I think that he's starting to realize too that those moves he made a couple years ago, they weren't the right moves, and now he has to buckle down.
Now he's buckling down, and making some changes, and I think he's fully open to that, which is exactly what you should want from a leader of baseball operations like Theo. But yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me too is Quintana. I mean, this is something we haven't, at least in my opinion, haven't really seen out of the Cubs since like Jake Arrieta, as far as just like a dominant pitcher. And that's something that they absolutely need to at least have a strong strength that can at least combat their weaknesses a little bit. And Jose Quintana is all of a sudden becoming that player, which is super exciting. And
we got Lester back.
We got Lester back too. And we may have a more interesting Cubs team all of a sudden. So
and also Tyler Chatwood pitched really well the other day.
Yeah,
Sunday afternoon.
turn things
That's if he can just be anything, just not walk with like I think Shaw used to call him, and I did too. This, of course, the way he played, the abysmal play of him from last year. He was supposed to be a guy that they could give us some innings as the fifth guy in the rotation, but he hasn't panned out. But stepping up in Lester's spot, taking up that fifth spot. Of course, he'll probably get moved back to the bullpen once John gets back. But if he can be anything in the bullpen, either as a long man or just a regular reliever, or as a starter, even if a guy goes down and plug him in, I think he'll be a very valuable player if we can get like at least 4 or 5 innings from him each time he comes out and he doesn't and walks around a problem like it wasn't the other night or the other day, Sunday night or Sunday during the day, excuse me. In their last series, I think against Diamondbacks, I think he's definitely a valuable player if he can be if he can be something. But that's a big question, of course.
Yep, for sure. All right, let's move on to our second and final call.
Hey, long-time listener, first-time caller. As you may or may not know, Tim Anderson of the Chicago White Sox just got suspended for tipping a dinger with a sick bat flip in the Royals White Sox game a few days ago. And, this has sparked another debate on bat flips. As a lot of people who just hate fun think it's just childish and just, rude. So my question is, do you think that batters should be able to throw the bats at pitchers who celebrate strikeouts? I'll hang up and listen.
Okay, so first of all, obviously with this story, there's a bigger thing that needs to be addressed just real quick at the top here. I mean, obviously, there are other reasons that Tim Anderson got his one-game suspension that's being talked about, considering that there were some words that were used in this situation, and, it was perceived in different ways, and it ended up causing a suspension in the end. That's the direction that the league went. I mean, at least in my personal opinion, I don't even know if I should really have the ability to have much of an informed opinion on this type of thing, just naturally based on who I am. I just don't have the cultural perspective that I would need to make a judgment call in this situation. So, I mean, at least for me, I'm kind of staying out of this as far as just I can't make the full judgment. So who am I to step in and, say what should or should not happen. But yeah, that's why the one game suspension happened. But I guess on the other hand, there is the conversation about bat flips that Carson brought up.
Yep.
And this is one that we've had before. I mean, as far as just, the broader conversation of just, batter pitcher annex and the unwritten rules of baseball is something that, we can talk about and we have talked about a lot. But I mean, I think that I'm starting to just move toward considering that, I've stated before that I'm against the shortening and amending of baseball rules to just make the game shorter, because I don't think that's what they need to do.
I don't like that at all.
I just think we need to get rid of games. That's my personal opinion. But I think that what could be done to add to the experience is, players should be able to be more emotional, and I think that, bat flips and those types of things should be more justified than they are now.
I think, like you said, I think old school and new school kind of have to figure it out. I think they got to find kind of like a medium in between that they can, I guess, kind of work out, because you got the old school guys saying, well, you shouldn't be able to throw your bat, and then I should be able to then hit you the next pitch. It's kind of a mess, I think.
Right.
And the guys need to figure it out. Like, the new school guys, like, well, I can throw my bat now. It's a new era of baseball, but the old school guys still are. If they do that, they're gonna plunk them the next at bat. So that's not kind of the culture you want to create in the baseball game. You got all these new school players more passionate than they've ever been, and I think these, I guess, older kind of players, I guess the guys that are kind of, I guess, grown up differently around the game, I guess kind of the more respectful way, I guess, the less kind of passionate way, the more of the, just follow the rules kind of way to play baseball. I think they need to figure out if bat flips, if a guy throws his bat, just don't lose your mind about it and start a brawl or whatever. I think the baseball needs to figure. You got to have a rule. I think you need to put something in place that if you throw your bat, if it's legal, then the guy can't come back and just hit you in retaliation, I think. So
yeah, I mean,
something's going to be figured
regardless of your perspective, I think it's something that needs to be clarified.
It's a bad look,
sure.
always.
It's a bad look either way, considering that there's these conflicts.
But
so I mean, I guess the unwritten rules in baseball, at least in this situation, should become written.
Yeah.
And that's what needs to happen as far as bat flips go. And
But I'm
yeah,
not saying.
I think baseball needs
Yeah.
passion. That's just my opinion. But even if you don't think that baseball needs passion, there needs to be a consensus that happens at some point here. So
I'm
yeah,
not saying
for
that
sure.
just picking up your bat and chucking in the other team's dugouts. All right, I'm just saying like if you
Right.
want to show some emotion after a home run and just kind of throw your bat towards the dugout or whatever, towards the home dugout, I'm fine with that. And I think fans kind of like to see that kind of stuff.
For sure.
Of course, like celebrations after home runs, like all like kind of the, I guess, walk-up music fans get into that too. All that other good, like the home run celebrations afterwards in the dugout once they get back after the home run trot. I think that's good, great stuff for baseball. Of course, the outfield celebrations too after games are always fun to watch. And I think it's kind of like the NFL. It's kind of sometimes it can turn into the no fun league, like the acronym for the NFL. But for baseball too, it can be the same way. And people that are
NFL moved in a more fun direction, so
They
maybe
have.
the MLB follows through. I mean,
So
all
hopefully-
sports leagues follow through, to be honest.
Yeah, hopefully they can figure it out, and I think they will eventually. But people just got to be open till that this is the new era of baseball, and guys are going to be very passionate, and they're not trying to show a guy up, I don't think, and they just want to win a game for their team, and they're not trying to show anybody up. So
For sure. So yeah, that's your scouting. Some big conversations, obviously. As far as the White Sox go, by the way, they're not bouncing back as much as the Cubs, so we'll have to see what happens with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was your scouting. As always, once again, send in your questions, 224-544-9330. We appreciate it from anybody and everybody to ask any national sports questions, because we will definitely talk about it on the show. And let's move into our last segment. Just wait till next week. So for me, the thing I'm excited for next week is draft results. I think it's more fun to talk about the draft after it happens, to be honest, because there's always some
A lot to
drama
break down.
and a lot to break down. So we'll make sure we get into that. There's going to be even more hockey. Game 7 between the Caps and Canes tonight is going to be a blast.
7,
I
you
can't
said?
wait. I love the we've kind of had a little bit of a love for the Carolina Hurricanes on this show, considering how they've
Management,
brought some
yeah.
excitement into the NHL. So that's, again, another part of that previous conversation we were just having. But yeah, looking forward to that Game 7 and more hockey in the future. And then next week, new sport enters our conversation. Obviously, is the first of the 3 races for the Triple Crown happens. Of course, one of the biggest sports spectacles, the Kentucky Derby, is approaching as May comes in. And, of course, it's always the first Saturday in May. So that's a conversation, I think, considering that we have guys like Carson and Peters on the show next week. It should be a fun topic, because
Yeah.
I want to see what their opinions are about the horses running the Kentucky Derby this year. So, yeah, we're going to have to see what happens next week. But, yeah, I'm excited for those things.
Yeah, so also like I've been looking forward to the draft. I always love not really watching it, but just seeing what unfolds, I guess.
For
It's
sure.
kind of all the drama, I guess, leading up, the smoke screens from executives, I guess, agents, whatever goes on there. They try to send teams a message that my guy, I guess, isn't from an agent's perspective, is the guy you want. Of course, there's a lot of false rumors. All the hoopla, I guess, leading up to it is always fun, and it's gonna be interesting to see where the Cardinals go. If they go quarterback, take Kyler Murray or another guy. I presume it would be Murray if they take anyone at a quarterback at number 1 overall. But so then Rosen could be moved during the draft, which would be really exciting for fans to see where he goes. Teams like we mentioned with Jay, like a Denver or Miami or Cincinnati even, that can move up, and then you can see the Jets could move back even as they got their quarterback.
That's the big thing we didn't
I'm
talk about
excited.
too much, but we did think about is those trades. Well, we're gonna have to see what happens with that, because
Yeah,
for all we
there
know,
could
we
be
have
a
a
lot.
completely different board than what we were talking about on the show. So
Yeah.
that's true.
It's more different than I think I think we saw some trades. We've seen more trades than we ever have these last couple of years. Of course, with the Bears moving up to get Mitch Trubisky, and of course the Kansas City Chiefs moving up to get Mahomes a couple of years in that same draft. And then last year too, there was probably the same amount of trades. But I think it was more pre-draft stuff, like the Jets moved up to get then Darnold. I forgot what pick they had then, but I know they moved up some spots to get Darnold, their guy. So teams that are aggressive to get their quarterbacks, they want to get their guy, and they're not afraid to give up draft slots to get their guy. So it'll be interesting to see what team this year wants the quarterback, finds a guy that they fall in love with from the pre-draft analysis and the combine, whatever, Senior Bowl, all that good stuff. So it'll be interesting to see who goes where for quarterbacks, at least. And there's a lot of others exciting talent on the defense. It's Nick Bosa, Jonathan Allen.
So
a
many
lot
names.
A lot of great
Yeah.
names that are going to be drafted tomorrow night, so it'll be fun.
Yeah, I mean, as we talked about, this show was originally It Matters Now, and it was about postseason football, and it was about college football and the NFL.
Yep.
And this is the one weekend where both of those worlds collide. So for us, it's kind of a fun time. And yeah, talking about all those results, considering how many people are coming out of college football and eventually, this weekend going to take their places in the NFL. It's going to be a lot of fun. Topic. There's going to be a lot of fun topics to talk about next week. It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's all we got today. Congratulations for sticking through as always and listening to this whole thing. Apologies for the little break-in thing, but that was fun.
Make sure we're
going to be locking the door from now on.
But I think if you fast forward to now, I guess make sure you go back and catch that interview.
Make sure you catch that because it was fun to edit. But yeah. Subscribe to listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Pocket Cast, RadioPublic. Give us a positive review on there. Give us 5 stars. It's super helpful. We need some more subscribers on YouTube. We got a good amount during the first week where we set our goal of 93 million at this point. Let's see where
we're probably getting there
as far as relative to T-Series right now. Let's see. 95. Okay, it's now 95, guys. We're falling behind, but I think we can still do it by the end of the year. So we got to get people subscribing.
We still got a month.
We still got a month. So, of course, read the 4 Scout, too. A lot of good articles. Stephen Young and Michael Vallone have an NBA award predictions. That's pretty good. Carter Hran has a Bulls, what do they need to do next? That's pretty good. There's a bunch more out there. So get ready for another week of Sports Scouts next week. In the meantime, as always, we'll keep on scouting. See you guys later. Carolina Hurricanes play their game 7 tonight, and even though I play a woodwind instrument, it is a brass bonanza. Hello? Shut.